Welcome to the new version of Let's Talk About Real Estate podcast, the podcast for real estate agents everywhere. I'm Lisa B, and together with Bjorn Kunzel, we're going to talk about everything real estate. We talk about what's working, what's not working, what's new, what's old, technology, and anything else to do with real estate. We'll answer your questions from the Facebook group Let's Talk About Real Estate. So if you have a question, we can help. Join the Facebook group today, and again, welcome to the show. Welcome beyond to another episode of Let's Talk About Real Estate. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Good to be here as always, Lisa. I hope you're having a fantastic day and hope everyone listening and watching is having a great day also.
I've had my computers pack it in, but anyway, it's all positive and it's all great and it's all wonderful. Yeah, so today we're going to be
Things
talking...
happen.
I know. Today we're going to be talking about how to make money in real estate. Now, obviously, this is not financial advice or anything, but this is just if you are working in real estate, what are some of the ways that you can potentially look at, sort of looking at your future and preparing for retirement one day so we're not listing and selling when we're 80 years old, right? So what are some of the ways that you believe that agents, and again, this isn't financial advice, but what's worked for you, what's worked for others that you know?
Well, I'll talk about my own personal circumstances. Back when I bought my first property back in 2006, just before the 07 boom, I paid $235,000 for that particular property. It was a 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom, 2 living area home on 624 square meters with a 22-meter frontage of flat land in an area called Modbury North, which is the northeast suburbs of Adelaide. Now, at the time when I purchased a particular property, I had a lot of people telling me don't buy it, it's too dear, because a lot of other properties, were around 200K mark at the time, which today sounds like peanuts, doesn't it? And that's my point exactly. I came up with a 60 grand deposit for purchasing that property with my wife, and that's the only deposit that I've ever put in out of my own pocket into any other property. Long story short, we've now got 5 properties and we've only ever used our own money to purchase that first one. Now, I was driving around an old beat up car at the time. I wasn't in real estate at that particular time. I was just working in furniture. And I can say this, the properties and the growth that's happened since 2006, I bought my second one in 2009, bought my third one in 2010, and fourth one was 2018, along with the fifth one. So the capital growth that's occurred in those properties is what gives me a lot of stability, a lot of wealth. And there's a certain procedure and method that I use to acquire the other properties after getting the first one, which we can talk about a little bit later. But I think as a real estate agent, you want to be investing in property yourself. There is a lot of real estate agents out there that surprisingly don't own their own homes for whatever reason. And I'm not having a go at that or saying anything negative about that. Everyone's got their own financial circumstances. But I think as a real estate agent, if we're going to be talking to people about developments, do we own a development site? Have we done developments in the past? If we're going to be talking to people about rentals, do we have any properties that we manage that are our own rentals that we own ourselves? If we're talking to people about buying and selling property, have we bought and sold property before ourselves? Now, I'll be honest here, I've only bought property. I've never sold any of my properties because I'm just accumulating. So I can honestly say the only experience I had with selling property, the closest to home was when I sold my parents' property. So I can still understand what that feels like because that was very personal. But I think as real estate agents, we should be involved in these areas. It's sort of like being a Toyota car salesperson and you drive a Mitsubishi. It doesn't make sense. So there's lots of ways to make money from real estate. I think the biggest one is to actually own real estate.
Yeah, that's right. And, obviously there's people just starting out, maybe they're renting and all that sort of thing. And, maybe they've got to work up to that as well. And, it might mean that you might have to live further out in the suburbs rather than paying a higher rent and things like that to get ahead. And like you said, drive an older car and, not go out for avocado on toast every day, as they say. There might be sacrifices that we have to make to actually save money as well, obviously. All right.
Yeah.
So obviously, yes, so you can do the developments, you can buy an investment property, you can use the capital that you've got in a property already and buy something else, and sort of, use the wealth that you've got or the capital that you've got in a property to help you buy something else. So, there's sort of, get a good financial advisor and all that sort of thing too, a good finance person.
I've never used a financial advisor because a financial advisor, to me, unfortunately, they just sell you insurance. You go there for financial advice, they sell you insurances. That's all it is. But What I have got is a very good mortgage broker,
Mhm.
and I've got a very good lawyer. Okay, because you want to make sure that everything you're doing is above board and legal, and a good accountant, because you want to make sure that everything is structured properly. So you can own property in your own name, you can own property in a trust, you can own property in the company, and each one of those has benefits, pros and cons to them. So the first property I bought was a property that my wife and I moved into for her first home. So we got a $7,000 first home buyer's grant at the time. We paid $235,000 for that property. Now, as you may or may not be aware, as long as you're borrowing less than 80% of the value of the property and fees, you don't have to pay what's called LMI, Lender's Mortgage Insurance. Once again, speak to your mortgage broker about this. I'm just sharing my own personal experiences. So we made sure that we avoided paying the Lender's Mortgage Insurance, because it is quite a large sum. Sometimes people can be paying, anywhere from 20 to 60 grand, depending on the price of the property. So you want to try to avoid that in all instances. Now, that property increased in value, and the property next door came up for sale. And it was up for sale back in 2009. Like I said, they wanted $300,000 for that. And my property, I got a valuation. My property was valued at $400,000. Now, obviously, we only owed, I think, about 180 grand on the property at the time. So let's just call it 200,000 to make it round figures. Okay. And we had another $200,000 in equity in our property. Now, if you own a property with a value of 400 grand, that means that I can take out $80,000. And if I've still got less than the mortgage in there, I can take that out as a deposit, as a 20% of the 400,000, because 20% of 400,000 is 20, 40, 60, 80 grand. Okay. So if we go 400 minus 80, that leaves 320. So that means, yes, my loan was only at 200. So I could actually take out that 20% deposit as an equity loan. So I did a separate split against my mortgage, did that as an equity loan, and then we bought the property next door. Building and pest inspection, we had an 80% lend over here, and we had a 20% lend over here. So a split loan, one secured against my existing property and the other one a brand new loan with a brand new bank. Did a property building and pest inspection, found a few issues, blah, 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 reduced the price. Anyway, settled it at $265,000. Now, when that property increased a few years later, and that property was then worth $350,000, what we did is we amalgamated the 80% over here with the loan with bank number B and the 20% loan with bank number A, to make sure that property had one loan with one bank against it. Then what we did is we realized that even with that property loan against that property of the 265,000 plus we borrowed the fee, so it was about 300 grand, we had equity in that property. So then we did the exact same thing again. And when we did the refinance, we had one loan for that exact property, and then we took out another piece of equity, 20%, and bought another property with another bank covering the other 80%. So we call this OPM. Not opium like what the gentlemen in China smoke out of their pipes, but other people's money. And it was something that was taught to me by one of my mentors back in the day, a guy called Vince Cavino, who owned a lot of property and still owns a lot of property around Payneham. And he said to me, Bjorn, what do you think I paid for my first property? I said, I got no idea, Vince. He goes, $16,000. He goes, what do you think it owes me today? I said, no idea, Vince. He said, $16,000. What do you think it's worth, Bjorn? I said, no idea, Vince. He said, it's worth about $1 million. So can you see what I've done there, Bjorn? I've done an interest-only loan. I haven't paid off the property at all, but the property has grown in capital value. And then he was telling me how you can then take that money out and then go buy another one. Take the money out, go buy another one. So that's one way that you can get ahead very, very quickly. I know a lot of people with a lot of equity in their current properties. And if I had a lot of equity in existing property, I would be looking at buying more real estate, because I can tell you this, our market here in Australia is solid and strong. I think there will be some market crashes around the world, but we need to understand one thing and one factor and one determining factor. Everybody wants to live in Australia and New Zealand. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
We are the safest place in the world to live. If there's a nuclear war, all the nukes are in the northern hemisphere. Down south is where you want to be.
Yeah.
We grow 16 times the amount of food that we need, and we're a migrant-based society, meaning that the government, unless they cut migration numbers from 500,000 or 700,000, whatever, I think it was 500 and something thousand last year, unless they cut those numbers down to 100 or 150,000, which they won't do, unless that happens, our market is going to remain strong. So what appears expensive today will be cheap tomorrow.
Yes, that's right. And when I said financial advisor, I don't mean somebody that sells you shares. I mean, like, my accountant is a business advisor and accountant.
Yep.
And so he looks at things strategically, and he's amazing. So, you know, get somebody, like you said, you know, get somebody who's, if, you know, finance, you know, accounting, business structures, things like that. Like you said, trust and all that sort of thing. That's really important to set things up properly. Definitely.
I think a financial advisor, sorry, my apologies there, is different to a financial planner. A financial planner are the ones at the banks, and you go in there and they'll just talk about making sure your insurances are set up properly.
Yeah.
Financial advisor could be somebody that is an accountant that's going to look at your overall scenario and work out where you need to put money. And there's different types of properties too. If you're someone paying high levels of tax, new properties might be what you want to target, or you might want to target an older property, subdivide, develop, build 3 newer properties, and then have the depreciation on those newer properties. So
it could be a property outside of where you live. Like, I referred you to a friend the other day who lives in Queensland, but is looking at buying something in your area, because he believes that that's going to be an area that goes up, that it's, you know, affordable, the investment's right, and all that sort of thing. So it might not necessarily be, you might get investment property from, you know, somewhere where you don't live as well. So, you know, do your own research and see what you believe is going to be a good investment for you. But that's some of the things dealing in property. So is there anything, I'm going to go into a few other things that real estate agents can do in order to set themselves up. Is there anything else you want to say with regards to property?
And the main thing I've realized now, I bought a property in 2006. It was expensive. 235,000. Anyone listening this is going to go, that's peanuts, right? That's nothing today. The next one I paid 265 for seemed expensive at the time. Peanuts today. The next one that I bought, peanuts again. Then I bought one just before COVID, and I paid 368,000 and COVID hit. And I thought, wow, I've just bought this property. What am I going to do? I've made a mistake. That property now, I've got people offering me 700,000 for that property, and I only bought that property back in 2018, like I said. So the golden rule with property is it always seems expensive today. Everything today always seems expensive, but what's expensive today is cheap tomorrow. Make sure you understand your structures. Make sure you have a good property, a good lawyer, good accountant, good mortgage broker, because when you get to a certain point, certain states have land tax. Now, I'm at a point where I'm at my threshold. I can't purchase any more property in South Australia, because if I do purchase more property in South Australia, I'm going to be paying a lot of land tax. And land tax can be $2,000 a year, or it can be $5,000, or it can be 15 grand a year, right? And it's just money that disappears. Now, what I need to do is divest into other states, Queensland, Western Australia, you know, Victoria, ACT, Northern Territory, whatever it might be, to start divesting. So you need to have a plan with property, and you need to understand, is your plan a 5-year plan? Is your plan a 12-month plan? If it's a 12-month plan, you might buy something run down, you might renovate it yourself and flip it if you're a tradesperson, for example, and make some profit. If it's a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, if it's a 10-year plan, you might buy something brand new and depreciate it for that 10 years. And then after it's served its purpose, you might sell it off. Is your plan a retirement plan? Mine, everything that I bought, they're all properties that can be subdivided, bar one. One's a holiday house at Wallaroo. Apart from that, all of them fit the minimum requirement. They've at least got a 20-meter frontage, and they've at least got 600 square meters of land. Now, we can subdivide down to 18-meter frontage here, so 9 meters per property, but I like to be able to build double garage because that's where the money is. So I've purchased properties that are not the most glamorous properties. I don't own $1 million houses, okay? But 2 of them are side by side. That gives me over 1,300 odd square meters to develop with a 50 meters of frontage. There's a lot of potential and opportunity there, and it's flat. And the other one is one that is subdividable in an area, the one that I bought before COVID, that's gone through the roof. And obviously one of the properties is the property that I live in. So look at what type of property, look at what your game plan is, look if it's short-term or long-term, and buy accordingly, because every property serves a different purpose.
Right. And if you're going to move into a property, it's a different purchase as to if you're going to subdivide it. And then I think that's a great thing about being in real estate too. You see what people do want to buy, you know, what they don't want to buy and what they do want to buy. So, you know, just buy well. You know, so people will, you know, some people will say invest in Bitcoin or invest in shares and all that sort of stuff. We're not talking about that today. So we're talking about the real estate. And so it'll be interesting to see how people have made their money in real estate. So I'll be looking forward to, if you want to write some comments or something. But now what I want to talk about is the model that we're in real estate as well, how you can actually, there's 5 different ways that you can earn an income as well. So you can list and sell as much as you like. That's the first way. So just like you said, so you can list and sell as much as you like. You only pay EXP 25 grand in commission a year. That's the most that you pay, 25% of what you bring in, up to 100,000. You keep everything over that. Then there's minimal monthly fees and transaction fees. So list and sell as much as you like, and buy property, as you said, save some, spend some, save some, invest some, right? Then the next way is shares. So we can get shares in the company as well. So that's a way that you can build an asset. So, you've built a healthy share portfolio as well. You can build a team. So you can actually adopt a leadership position. You can bring people into the company. You can mentor them. You can, sort of nurture people and have a legacy of people that you can help. In 24 different countries around the world, we're helping agents in India now, changing their lives. We're changing people's lives every day here in Australia as well. So you can do that and build a team, and you can get a reoccurring income from that. Referrals as well. So that's an income source that I'm always surprised that agents don't focus on. So, every single buyer that you ever speak to, you've got to say, have you got a property to sell? And you can do a referral to anywhere. Basically, we're in EXPs in 24 countries. You can do a referral in 24 countries. So make sure you're always asking buyers, have they got a property to sell? You can do a 20% referral to another agent. That's an industry standard where we are, in real estate. So make sure you do that. And even a referral to buyer's agents. If you've got hot buyers that haven't, that have sold a property and they need somewhere to buy, maybe they need somebody who's going to focus on their purchase and go around and do all of the off-market sales, because they're going to know about people that, say there's a seller that's saying, I don't really want it on the open market, but if you get me a buyer for X amount, they'll have access to a lot of those off-market sales. So, do a 20% referral to a buyer's agent and help that buyer's agent as well. So that's another way. And then also property management. So you can, there's different ways that you can outsource your property management department as well, and still, take an active part in it if you want to as well, but you can help landlords as well. So that's 5 different ways that you can have an income within EXP to be able to do what you're saying, to be able to have your income, to have what you've got coming in, spend some, save some, invest some. And that's really what we should be looking at all the time. We don't want to get it and then blow it all. We've sort of got to have that balance as well, the 3 buckets of your investments as well. So what would you say to somebody that go, yeah, but it's okay for you, Bjorn, you bought something for $235,000 in your area, but that's not around anymore. Okay. What would you say to somebody that's going to say that to you?
Yeah, but my parents bought property for £5,000 as well, and that's not around anymore either. And there's people that bought property off me 4 years ago before COVID for $450,000, and that's not around anymore either. And there's people that are buying properties from me today at $750,000. And there's people that are buying properties off me today for $1 million. Like, what is expensive today is cheap tomorrow. And I hate to say it, I hate to say this, there's one determining factor why the Australian residential market is so strong, and it's because the rest of the world is so unstable. And that's the honest truth of the matter. We're bringing in a lot of migration, and that migration is fueling this housing crisis, which we're currently in, supply and demand. And the government won't cut the migration numbers, because if the government cut the migration numbers, our figures will make us look like we're in a recession. Okay. They should be cutting the migration numbers. I'm a migrant. My parents are migrants, not because I've got anything against migrants, but when you've got 100 properties and you want to bring in 500 people, it doesn't take a rocket science to realize, where are we going to put the 400 people? There are people in Australia now facing homelessness, not because of drug and alcohol abuse or because of domestic violence. There are families facing homelessness because the government has cocked it up so bad, and they're bringing in way too many people right now for the current housing that we've got. So while this housing shortage is here today, I think this housing shortage, the way the governments are running the country, will be here for a long time to come. Now, like I said earlier when I touched on nuclear war, people think, what's this whack job talking about? do your research, guys. The Northern Hemisphere is where all the nukes are, okay? Look at what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. Look at what's happening around the world. Look at what's happening with Israel. And you know, and Iran's about to get involved. There's a lot of instability. Look what's happening in the United States. There's a lot of instability in the world. Everybody wants to be in Australia. Everybody wants to be in New Zealand, okay? New Zealand is very limited with the amount of space that it has. Australia is vast. We could probably fit the entire world's population in Australia, right? Yeah, we'd be living in deserts as well, but it could be done. We produce so much. We are basically a self-sustainable nation. There are so many migrants wanting to come to Australia, and the government will continue to bring in more and more migrants, and that will continue to put the pressure on the housing market, and there will continue to be a supply shortage. And while there's a supply shortage, rentals will continue to increase and property prices will continue to increase. Now, I own rentals, and I've got to say, my tenants do not pay market rent at all. They pay basically around about 30 to 50% discount on what market rate would be. However, if I were to put those rents up to market rate, I'd be making a lot more profit, which I don't need because I'm working on the capital growth. But I can tell you, if I put 2 of those properties up to market rent, there'd be 2 families that would be homeless tomorrow. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to make somebody homeless over my own profits and gains. I purchased those properties at a price where I can still have a very low rent and it's covering the mortgage, covering the interest repayments, right? Today, if you buy a property today for $700,000, you need to rent that property out. Let's just do the maths on it. Let's say you buy $700,000 and you don't want to be costing you money. Let's just say so on 7% interest. That's 49 grand a year. Divide that by 52. That's $942 a week rent, right? Now, it's not going to rent for 942. It's probably going to rent for around about 700 bucks a week. So someone's going to be having to contribute now a couple $100 out of their own pocket. However, I can tell you that if we have this same conversation on that $700,000 property in 10 years' time, it's not going to be worth 700 anymore. It's probably going to be worth 1.4 or 1.2 or whatever it might be. So property works in cycles. The Australian market is strong. It's heavily regulated, and the rest of the world is very unstable. And that's why Australia's property market will continue to be a very strong candidate. And I know it sounds a little bit negative about why it is going to be a strong candidate, but my advice to anybody with kids, if you can afford to buy a property, buy one now. It's going to be very difficult because back when our parents did purchase, it was, say the ratio was, it's three times the annual income. Now it's like 11 times the annual average income. So the ratios are increasing and it's going to become harder and harder. We are looking at generations to come of permanent renters. Okay. Now, the reason why I've purchased some of the properties I've purchased is so that my kids have some stability in the future. So there's a lot to be said for property. And I've never seen anybody investing in property that's had a long-term strategy lose.
No, it's like, where I live, my neighbours bought a property just before COVID and they bought it for about 980,000. Within a couple of months, it was worth 2 million. They doubled in a few months, a few short months, so that can happen too. It doesn't have to be, you bought 5 properties. It might just be one property that somebody buys. And then, over that period of time, it does go up, generally speaking. So again, not financial advice, but, on history in Australia, every 10 years, it doubles, doesn't it? So you might get lucky like my neighbours and in 3 months, they can make, $1 million. It doesn't happen all the time, but, but that's real estate. But there's lots of different ways that you can make money in real estate and build assets and set yourself up for the future. That's really what we want to be doing. You don't want to be listing and selling for the rest of your life. You want to sort of play it smart, that you've got investments, you've got your superannuation kind of, worked out, you can sell your properties, you've got money to live on and things like that. So that's what we always want to be looking at, don't we? We want to be able to set ourselves up exit strategy out of real estate. That's something we don't really talk about too much, is the exit strategy. But that's really what we need to be focusing on, like thinking like business people and thinking like, how can I make money? How can I build assets? And how can I retire and travel or do whatever,
Well, 18 years ago, I made a decision to become a property owner when my friends were buying fancy cars and I drove around in a crappy car.
Yeah.
Right. And now I've got, if I sold all those properties, I could retire right now. I made a decision back in 2009 So what's that? 15 years ago, to get into real estate, to become a real estate agent and to earn above average income. Then I made a decision 4 years ago to get out of the traditional real estate model where I was just listing and selling and making money from listing and selling, and getting into the model where I've got 5 lanes of income. And that's added a share portfolio of over $100,000 into my bank. Well, it's sitting there in a share portfolio, but I could sell if I wanted. I've also got property management division where I've got some properties that I could sell. That's a saleable asset. I'm also retaining everything I earn, minus about 28 grand a year by being in the right model, right? So I made decisions, and it all stems back to the decision my wife and I made 18 years ago to get into the market that has put me in the position I'm in today. Now, I know some friends that had those fancy cars and then bought other fancy cars and then bought the avocados on toast and all this other fancy stuff, right? And that only just recently got into the property market, right?
Yeah.
Now, they've had to pay the price that they paid for one property is the price that I have accumulated 4 properties at.
Yeah.
Do you understand that the key here is to get in as soon as you possibly can? When's the best time to get involved in real estate? As soon as you possibly can. Forget about what seems expensive today. Bitcoin at 2 cents seemed like a ripoff. What's this 2 cent fairy tale stuff? Now it's at 100 odd grand or whatever it is, right? People are going, oh, it's too expensive now. What if it gets to 200 grand? What if it gets to 300? What if it gets to 500? What if it gets to... Everything goes up. And I'll tell you why everything goes up, because we have a false monetary system. And once again, this isn't financial advice, but I do keep my finger on the pulse, right? We've gone from the gold standard, okay? The gold standard was removed, which meant that every dollar that was printed had some metal, something backing it. And what was backing it was gold. What's backing the dollar today is nothing. It's fairy tale. It's imaginary. They take $100 and they lend it out, and that $100 becomes $100,000.
Yeah.
Right. So we're in a fiat. It's called fiat currency. It's a very stupid system, and the world has been chasing its tail ever since it was introduced in the 70s, right? And it's the worst thing that's ever happened to financial policy, in my opinion. Bjorn Kunzel, not financial advisor. This is not financial advice. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to the monetary policy, and it started in the United States. And it never should have happened. It should have remained on a gold standard, because if it was on a gold standard, we wouldn't be paying $900,000 for houses anymore today. What would be happening is a house might be $500,000, right? But they need the inflation to keep the system going. So that's where we need this inflation to keep going. So inflation will still continue. And people go, but what's going to happen is one day, is it going to cost $3 million to buy a house? Probably. It probably will. Right. But what it will mean is there'll be two races of people. It's like this. You had the rich, you had the middle class, and you had the poor. And in the past, this was sort of brought up to here, right? Now what's happening is the middle class have been exterminated. The middle class have been eliminated throughout the COVID pandemic. And I've got my own reasons for that. And I think it was an entire setup personally myself. And I've got lots of reasons for that, but we won't go into that, right? Whenever you're going to drop money, the interest rates down to 0.1%, you're going to create inflation. Whenever you print money, right? If I've got one calculator here, it's worth something. If all of a sudden there's 100 calculators in the room, they're all worth nothing. That's what they've done, okay? Now, what they're doing, it's created two races. There's rich and there's poor, and there isn't going to be a middle class before too long. So what you need to do is, if you've got the ability to get investing into real estate, the good old Australian dream, there's no point just having one property. You need to have multiple properties, because if you've just got one, well, guess what? You need to sell that to make some money, but you need to buy again into the market. This is why my investment strategy has been multiple smaller units, because if a 200 property is now worth 700 grand, and that other 265 is now worth 700 grand, and that one at 368 is now worth 700 grand. Do you see what I can do? I can sell one and I can cash in 300 grand, and I've still got somewhere to live, and I've still got other properties. If I've got one big house worth $2 million or $3 million or $4 million, and I sell that, well, I need to buy back into the market, right? So I believe multiples is the way to go. I believe inflation will continue. I believe that there may be some stagnation around the world in other residential real estate markets that aren't as heavily regulated as ours. I believe people will still continue to wanting to come to Australia. I believe the world will remain unstable for years and years, if not decades to come. And I believe that Australia is a very stable country where we have everything that everybody needs. And this is the lucky country. This is the place that people want to be. So as long as it remains that country, which I think it always will, no matter what you're buying, no matter what price you're paying, you're always going to be okay.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, there's lots of different ways that people work out what they think is going to happen in real estate. You know, I know just before COVID and during COVID, people were saying real estate's going to go down, it's going to go down, it's going to go down. And it did the absolute opposite. I think every single person that was out there speculating was wrong, right? So it's kind of like there's so many contributing factors, but I think, you know, I agree with what you said, you know, the supply and demand, you know, all of those things that make our, you know, where we live somewhere that people do want to live, you know, that we're always going to have that supply and demand here, you know, other countries, that's going to make us, you know, stable and you know, a great economy, a great market to buy real estate. So you really can't go wrong. But again, that's not financial advice from either of us. That's just our perception on things. But yeah. So anybody that wants any more information about EXP and how you can create an income within there, let us know. Contact either Bjorn or myself. And always just be looking at how you can set yourself up for an exit strategy out of real estate that you're not listing and selling until you're 80. That's the main goal.
That's
All
it.
right. Okay. Thanks a lot, Bjorn. Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks, guys. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Let's Talk About Real Estate podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have a question about real estate, then please join the group on Facebook, also called Let's Talk About Real Estate. For those of you who are interested in EXP, please join us at 10 a.m. Brisbane time every Wednesday morning for EXP Explained. Thank you again for joining us, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and see you next week.